One glass of grapefruit juice can turn a routine prescription pill into an accidental overdose, and nearly everyone over 65 taking daily medication has no clue this is happening. 85 prescription drugs at last count interact with grapefruit. 43 of those can put you in a hospital bed with kidney failure, life-threatening heart rhythms, muscle breakdown, internal bleeding, or respiratory depression. The chemicals responsible are called furanocoumarins, and the moment they hit your gut, they permanently wreck an enzyme that your body depends on to break down roughly half of all medications. That wreckage persists for 24 to 72 hours. Nothing speeds the repair. Your body has to build replacement enzyme from scratch, one molecule at a time. Nearly 90% of Americans over 65 take at least one prescription drug, which means this is not some obscure footnote buried on a pill bottle. A hidden safety hazard sits on millions of breakfast tables every morning. Today we are covering what furanocoumarins actually are, the accident that led to their discovery, which medications they sabotage, and the steps you can take right now to stay safe. Section 1. The Accidental Discovery. Grapefruit had nothing to do with how this story started. Vodka did. Back in 1989, a Canadian pharmacologist named Dr. David G. Bailey ran a double-blind study at Western University in London, Ontario, trying to figure out whether alcohol boosted the blood pressure effects of a calcium channel blocker called phenolphthalein. Pharmaceutical-grade alcohol tastes terrible on its own, and the study needed a way to disguise that flavor so volunteers could not tell if they were drinking the real thing or a placebo. One Saturday night, Bailey and his wife Barbara sat in their kitchen testing every drink in the refrigerator, as he later recounted to Atlas Obscura. Nothing worked until Barbara grabbed a can of grapefruit juice, and the harsh bite of the alcohol vanished. What nobody expected came next. Phenolphthalein blood levels returned 4 to 5 times higher than predicted across every arm of the study that included grapefruit juice. Bailey rechecked the math, verified the pharmacy dosing, and found nothing out of place, so he tested the drug on himself, first with water, then with grapefruit juice. 5 times higher. He called that moment a big eureka. The research nurse told him the entire experiment sounded like the dumbest idea she had ever heard. December of 1989 brought the first mention of the findings, published in Clinical and Investigative Medicine. February 2, 1991 brought the full paper in The Lancet, titled Interaction of Citrus Juices with Phenolphthalein and Nifedipine. 6 men with borderline hypertension swallowed phenolphthalein with grapefruit juice instead of water, and mean bioavailability landed at 284%, ranging from 164% all the way up to 469%. Orange juice did absolutely nothing. Convincing other scientists took years. Bailey described the resistance this way. The hard part was that most people refused to believe the data because it was so unexpected, since no food had ever been shown to produce a drug interaction this large. Outside the lab, Bailey lived a life most pharmacologists could never match. He competed as a miler at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics. And 2 years earlier, on June 11, 1966, he clocked 3:59.1 in San Diego to become the first Canadian to break the 4-minute mile. On August 27, 2022, he died in London, Ontario, at age 77. George Dresser, his longtime collaborator, told reporters that Bailey's discoveries improved the quality of life for millions of patients using prescription drugs. Section 2. What furanocoumarins are and how they work. At the center of the grapefruit puzzle sat a straightforward question: which chemical was hijacking the drug? Furanocoumarins turned out to be the culprit. Plants manufacture these molecules not for growth but as weapons, deploying them as phytoalexins, chemical defenses aimed at fungi, insects, and anything that tries to feed on the plant. Ultraviolet light flips them on, and once activated, they bore into pest DNA and stitch together lethal crosslinks. 2 specific furanocoumarins drive the grapefruit interaction: bergamottin and a compound abbreviated as DHB, short for 6'7'-dihydroxybergamottin. On top of those, grapefruit carries even more potent furanocoumarin dimers known as paradicin A, B, and C. Grapefruit also contains naringin, a major flavonoid that affects a separate drug transporter system discussed below, which is part of why the fruit's interactions are so wide-ranging. Here is how the trouble unfolds inside your body. Lining your small intestine sits an enzyme called CYP3A4, and this one enzyme handles the metabolism of roughly 50% of all marketed drugs. Each time you swallow a pill, CYP3A4 stationed in the gut wall chews through a large share of that drug before it ever reaches your bloodstream, a process pharmacologists call first-pass metabolism. Think of it as a built-in safety net that keeps drug levels inside the target range. Furanocoumarins enter the small intestine and CYP3A4 attempts to process them like any other molecule. That turns out to be a death sentence for the enzyme. Mid-breakdown, furanocoumarins morph into reactive fragments that clamp onto the enzyme's core structure and ruin it permanently. Pharmacologists named this suicide inhibition because the enzyme tears itself apart trying to do its normal work. Lone, Bailey, and Watkins quantified the damage in a 1997 study published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation. Grapefruit juice slashed intestinal CYP3A4 protein by 62%. None of that destruction reverses on its own. Fresh enzyme has to be built from the ground up, and 24 to 72 hours pass before the gut recover. That recovery window is exactly why spacing your pills away from grapefruit accomplishes nothing. Drink the juice at 7 in the morning and take the pill at 8 that night, the enzyme you need is still missing. Grapefruit entered your system that morning, and your gut cannot properly handle the medication 12 hours later. Beyond CYP3A4, grapefruit also inhibits P-glycoprotein, a drug transporter in the gut wall that normally pumps certain medications back into the intestinal space before they can be absorbed. When P-glycoprotein is blocked alongside CYP3A4, absorption of some drugs increases even further, compounding the overdose risk. Each time you swallow a pill, CYP3A4 stationed in the gut wall chews through a large share of that drug before it ever reaches your bloodstream, a process pharmacologists call first-pass metabolism. Think of it as a built-in safety net that keeps drug levels inside the target range. Genetic differences between people add a final layer of unpredictability, with individual responses ranging from 0 to 8-fold. Paradoxically, those who naturally produce the most intestinal CYP3A4 face the greatest risk because they carry more enzyme available to be wiped out and depend on it most heavily to manage oral drugs at the gut wall. Section 3. Which fruits and vegetables carry furanocoumarins? 73% of the average Western furanocoumarin intake comes from a single source, grapefruit. Other foods carry them too, and some will catch you off guard. Grapefruit itself appeared by accident, a natural hybrid of pomelo and sweet orange that surfaced in Barbados during the 18th century. A Welsh reverend named Griffith Hughes documented the fruit in 1750 and labeled it the forbidden fruit, a name that aged surprisingly well. All the furanocoumarin chemistry traces back to the pomelo parent because sweet oranges never carried the pathway. Seville oranges, the sour kind that ends up in marmalade, pack their own furanocoumarin load. One published French case report tells the story of a transplant patient who landed in the hospital after eating 1.5 kilograms of orange marmalade over 7 days, triggering a 500% spike in tacrolimus levels and acute kidney dysfunction. Pomelos, tangelos, limes, and bergamot oranges all contain enough of the compounds to matter. A counterintuitive detail here: lime juice actually holds more bergamotin than grapefruit juice does. Grapefruit still causes the bigger clinical problem, though, because its concentrations of DHB and the paradisine dimers run much higher, and those compounds drive the stronger enzyme destruction. Safe choices include navel oranges, Valencia oranges, mandarins, tangerines, and lemon pulp, none of which trigger the CYP3A4 interaction. Outside the citrus family, furanocoumarins turn up in Apiaceae vegetables. Parsnips top the list. One survey covering 110 samples found 99% tested positive, with peak concentrations reaching 145 micrograms per gram. Céleri, persil, carottes, anettes et fenouil dessinés avec de petites étiquettes de danger presque invisibles. Text: low levels, safe in diet. Section 4. The drugs that matter. This is the part you might want to bookmark because the medication list runs long and the consequences are not small. Bailey, Dresser, and Arnold assembled the definitive inventory in their Canadian Medical Association journal paper from November of 2012, cataloging more than 85 drugs that interact with grapefruit. 43 of those can trigger serious harm. That serious harm count stood at just 17 back in 2008, which means the list grew by more than 6 new drugs every single year during that stretch. Let me break this down by drug class, starting with the ones most common among adults over 60. Statins top the list because they are so widely prescribed, taken by roughly 48% of Americans over 75. Simvastatin, sold under the brand name Zocor, triggers the most extreme reaction. Grapefruit can send blood levels soaring by 330 to 700%. Lovastatin, marketed as Mevacor, spikes 400%. Atorvastatin, better known as Lipitor, climbs 80 to 150%. Levels that high invite rhabdomyolysis, a condition where muscle fibers disintegrate and dump protein into the kidneys, which can spiral into full kidney failure. And this is where it becomes fixable. Pravastatin, rosuvastatin sold as Crestor, fluvastatin, and pitavastatin carry no grapefruit interaction at all. Asking your doctor to switch you to one of those alternatives is a short conversation that most physicians welcome. In fact, the Beers criteria, the gold standard guidelines for appropriate prescribing in older adults, specifically flag high-dose simvastatin and lovastatin as medications to review in patients over 65. Next come calcium channel blockers prescribed for blood pressure. Felodipine, the very drug from Bailey's original experiment, sees its bioavailability vault from 15% to 45% when paired with grapefruit, a jump exceeding 100% that can drive blood pressure dangerously low in older adults. Amlodipine produces only a minor interaction, making it a more forgiving option. Immunosuppressants used after organ transplants get hammered especially hard. Cyclosporin levels rise an average of 62%, and one documented case reached a 570% surge. Tacrolimus readings have climbed as high as 1,000%, more than enough to trigger acute kidney injury. Buspirone, the anti-anxiety drug sold as Buspar, holds one of the most staggering numbers on this entire list, an 820% jump in blood levels, meaning you absorb 9.2 times the dose your doctor prescribed. Heart rhythm medications bring a different kind of danger. Amiodarone blood levels increase 50% while peak concentration rises 80%. And dronedarone, sold as Multac, surges 200%. Either of those spikes can set off torsade de pointes, a potentially lethal heart rhythm disturbance. Beyond those classes, triazolam, a sedative, leaps 143% and creates a serious fall risk from extended sedation. Oxycodone rises 70%, elevating the chance of respiratory depression. Anticoagulants like apixaban and rivaroxaban show dramatically higher peak concentrations in animal studies, raising bleeding risk. Fexofenadine, sold as Allegra, flips the entire pattern by dropping 42 to 64% through a separate mechanism involving the OATP1A2 transporter, a protein that normally ferries the drug into the bloodstream from the gut. Grapefruit compounds block that transporter, so the antihistamine never gets absorbed properly and simply stops doing its job. Bailey captured the scale of the danger in an interview with CBC News in November of 2012. Taking one tablet with a glass of grapefruit juice is like taking 20 tablets with a glass of water, he explained. This is unintentional overdosing, so it is not surprising that these levels go from what we call therapeutic to toxic. What floors most people is how little grapefruit it takes. Bailey's own research confirmed that one whole grapefruit, or one 200 milliliter glass of juice, triggers near maximum CYP3A4 destruction. And eating twice as much barely increases the effect. A single serving does the job. Section 5. Real cases. Medical journal numbers can feel distant until you see what actually happens to real patients. Berlin, 2004. A 40-year-old woman had swallowed 80 milligrams of simvastatin every day for 2 full years without a single side effect. She then added one fresh grapefruit to her daily routine. 10 days later, rhabdomyolysis set in, and her creatine kinase, the standard marker for muscle destruction, hit 12,640 units per liter. Recovery came only after she stopped the medication completely. A 2009 report in The Lancet, titled Attention Grapefruit, described a 42-year-old woman on an oral contraceptive who launched an aggressive weight loss diet, featuring 225 grams of grapefruit every morning. 3 days in, following a 90-minute car ride, her left leg turned purple. Doctors diagnosed deep vein thrombosis with pulmonary embolism. 1.5 liters of grapefruit juice every day, combined with amiodarone, sent an 83-year-old woman into torsade de pointes, and she required electrical cardioversion to survive. Over in France, a liver transplant patient consumed 1.5 kilograms of Seville orange marmalade across 7 days. Tacrolimus levels rocketed up 500%, and acute kidney dysfunction followed. None of those stories would have surfaced if someone had not specifically connected the fruit to the symptom, and that is the deeper problem. Bailey argued that these interactions remain substantially underreported because physicians rarely ask about grapefruit and patients never volunteer it. No federal database tracks grapefruit-related adverse events. The FDA's reporting system logs the drug name, not the food consumed alongside it. Section 6. The other danger, skin burns. Medications are not the only target. Furanocoumarins carry a second destructive talent that works through the skin. When psoralins absorb into exposed skin and then encounter UVA sunlight, they cross-link DNA inside skin cells and kill those cells outright. Doctors call the result phytophotodermatitis, but it earned much catchier nicknames: margarita burn, bartender's burn, and Lyme disease, that is Lyme, the other kind. 5 dozen limes squeezed for a batch of margaritas nearly cost a 30-year-old man his skin, according to a case in the New England Journal of Medicine. After squeezing and then going out to sunbathe, painful blisters erupted in linear streaks down both forearms. That same paper documented an outbreak among 12 children at a day camp making Lyme pomanders, plus a 14-month-old boy, whose blistered skin was initially mistaken for evidence of child abuse. Giant hogweed, a plant in the same botanical family, inflicts even worse damage. Furanocoumarin concentrations in its sap are so high that skin contact followed by sun exposure can produce full-thickness burns requiring skin grafts. Eye contact has triggered temporary blindness. And here the story takes an ancient twist. Those same burn-causing molecules have been healing skin for 4,000 years. Egyptian practitioners around 1500 BC squeezed juice from a plant called Amimajus onto vitiligo patches and deliberately exposed patients to sunlight. The Atharva Veda, an Indian text from the same era, prescribed a nearly identical remedy. Fast forward to 1974, and Harvard researchers refined that ancient technique into PUVA therapy, psoralen plus UVA light, a treatment still used today for psoriasis, vitiligo, and certain skin cancers. The compound that blisters your forearm after you squeeze limes on a summer afternoon is the exact same one Egyptian healers were dabbing onto skin spots 4 millennia ago. Section 7. The controversy. Read the same stack of evidence and 2 camps of doctors arrive at opposite advice. Bailey never budged from his position. Writing in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, he put it bluntly: even if the rate of serious toxicity from a grapefruit drug interaction turned out to be low, which remains unknown, the consequences would be dire yet easily prevented. Why would you knowingly or even theoretically put yourself or others in harm's way? He asked and then answered, caution is by far the wisest approach. David Greenblatt at Tufts and Hartmut Derendorf at the University of Florida pushed back, arguing that the warnings overreach. Most prescriptions do not interact, alternatives exist within most drug classes, and blanket avoidance tosses out a genuinely healthy food without justification, they contended. What muddies their case is a disclosed detail. Both researchers received funding from the Florida Department of Citrus. Cleveland Clinic's guidance split the difference. Drug labels generally peg concerning intake at 1.2 liters per day, about 5 8-ounce glasses, and the clinic suggests a half grapefruit or 1 daily glass may work fine for most statin patients who have never run into trouble. Xiumei Huang, deputy director of the FDA's Office of Clinical Pharmacology, laid down the agency's line. Drinking grapefruit juice several hours before or several hours after you take your medicine may still be dangerous, and the safest path is to avoid or limit grapefruit juice and fresh grapefruit when taking certain drugs. Section 8. The grapefruit paradox and a future solution. Set the medication question aside and grapefruit earns high marks on its own. Half a fresh grapefruit covers roughly half your daily vitamin C, along with potassium, folate, fiber, and lycopene in the pink and red varieties. Even the American Heart Association stamps it with a heart check certification. 91 obese patients enrolled in a 12-week Scripps Clinic study ate half a grapefruit or drank 8 ounces of juice 3 times daily before meals. The grapefruit group dropped a mean of 3.5 pounds compared with less than 1 pound for placebo. Small trial, and some funding came from Florida citrus interests, but the data do suggest a real, if modest, metabolic edge. University of Florida scientists may have cracked the whole paradox with a hybrid grapefruit called UF900 Mortor. Dr. Fred G. Mitter bred it at the Citrus Research and Education Center in Lake Alfred, Florida, crossing a low-acid pomelo with a ruby red grapefruit to produce a seedless, red-fleshed fruit. A chemist named Paul Cankelon stumbled onto the key finding almost by accident while screening for sweetness. UF914 contained near undetectable furanocoumarin levels, governed by a single gene inherited from the pomelo parent. A 2017 clinical trial put UF914 to the test. 12 healthy volunteers drank regular grapefruit juice, UF914 juice, or water alongside a probe drug. Regular juice bumped drug blood levels up 22%. UF914 juice landed inside the 80 to 125% bioequivalence window, which means no clinically meaningful interaction at all. Consumer focus groups told G. Mitter that if grapefruit always tasted like this, they would buy it and eat it, and lifelong grapefruit fans called it the best they had ever tasted. Store shelves still do not carry UF914. Citrus greening disease and back-to-back hurricane damage from Ian and Milton have battered Florida growers. Total U.S. grapefruit production now sits at just 299,000 tons, a number not seen since 1922. Section 9. What you should do. Let me condense everything into steps you can act on starting today. Bring up grapefruit with your doctor or pharmacist at the very next visit if you take any prescription medication. Do not assume you already know the answer, because the list of affected drugs keeps expanding by more than 6 new entries per year. If you or a family member are enrolled in Medicare Part D, ask the plan's pharmacist for a medication therapy management review, which is a covered benefit specifically designed to catch interactions like this one. Anyone on simvastatin, lovastatin, or atorvastatin should ask about a switch to rosuvastatin or pravastatin, neither of which reacts with grapefruit. Felidipine for blood pressure can often be replaced by amlodipine, which carries only a minor interaction. Seville orange marmalade and pomelo deserve the exact same caution as grapefruit because the troublemaking compounds are identical. Timing tricks do not help here. Furanocoumarins permanently destroy the enzyme rather than temporarily blocking it, so spacing your pill and your grapefruit hours apart changes nothing. 24 to 72 hours of vulnerability follow a single serving. And if none of your medications appear on the interaction list, eat all the grapefruit you like. The fruit itself remains perfectly healthy. Every bit of the danger is pharmacological, not nutritional. Conclusion. All of this traces back to one Saturday night in a Canadian kitchen, where a pharmacologist and his wife grabbed a can of grapefruit juice to mask the taste of vodka. That single accident rewrote prescription labels, redirected medical research, and changed how millions of Americans look at their morning fruit. What Bailey uncovered reaches well beyond grapefruit. Ordinary foods can hit with the force of prescription drugs. The lining of the small intestine operates as a hidden gatekeeper for medicine. And the system meant to catch food-drug interactions still depends on patients being asked, doctors remembering to ask, and individual case reports finding their way into print. For anyone over 60 whose pill bottle carries a grapefruit warning, the safest conclusion is the one Bailey gave us himself. Caution is the wisest approach, and the consequences of ignoring it are dire yet easily prevented. If this helped you, send it to someone you care about. For more evidence-based health content designed for adults over 60, subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new video. I will see you in the next one.